Good afternoon, everybody. Are you are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And you can see the slides on the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay then, let's start for the day. So today we begin our workshop on oral communication skills with a session on presentation skills. All of us will have to do a presentation at some point or the other. When it is time for us to do a presentation, no one is going to teach us how to do a presentation. Because people will just assume that all of you already know all of these things, right? So it is very important while you are completing your degree to get to know certain essential communication skills which will be of use to you in the future. That is the purpose of this session. There are three basic elements to any good presentation. The first element is the story that you want to tell your audience. It could be a message also. So, the presentation that we are making is centered around this message, and we craft a story so as to tell the message. The second element is the visual element. Usually, most presentations nowadays are PowerPoint presentations. So you will have some kind of a visual element. It could be slides, just text and a few images or data representations, maybe sometimes a few videos as well. So it will always have a visual element. The third and the most important element is delivery. Just because you have a great message and just because you have great slides, you're not going to have a great presentation. Ultimately, you are the one who should be connecting the message with the visuals using your delivery. So, the third important aspect is that of delivery. This is perhaps the most human aspect of a presentation. Sometimes, even if your slides aren't that good, you can still make a good presentation. Even if you make a few errors here and there in your storytelling, you can make a good presentation. But if you make errors in your delivery, you will not be able to correct it in a presentation. In fact, any other errors in a presentation are corrected using your delivery. Right. So the first element is the message or the story. Obviously, in order to make a presentation, we will have some kind of a script in place. It could be a detailed script or it could be just a list of bulleted points. But we'll have something in place. So, how do we craft that script? Preparation is key here. Okay? So, first you prepare and then you craft your script. Before I proceed, I just want to tell you something. I do have a rather erratic internet connection. So, if at some point you're not able to hear me properly, please stop me or send a message in the chat. Okay? Right. Nothing can replace research. You have to research and then you have to do some more research and then you have to do some more research. If there is some kind of a gap in your knowledge of the subject, that will show in your presentation. So make sure that you are very familiar with the area that you are presenting on. Brainstorming is when we discuss with several different people, consult several different sources in order to, okay, that's a very weird name. Okay, I'm sorry. In order to bring together as much of information as you can. So you're just collecting information about the topic at this point. By brainstorming, by discussing with others, and by consulting a variety of sources, you are trying to amass as much of information as possible. Then you prepare your rough draft. Okay? A rough draft will not have a great deal of structuring to it. It'll be just a brain dump. You're dumping all of that information down into a paper or maybe into a Word document. You're dumping all of that unsorted, rough information together so that you can then proceed into the next stage, which is mind mapping. At this stage, you structure your presentation. You decide what goes into your presentation, what doesn't go into your presentation, what fits into your argument, what doesn't fit into your argument. Then you eliminate and then you sort all of that information so that you can structure your presentation accordingly. And how do you structure this presentation? You structure it around your core message. There must be something that you want your audience to take away from the presentation. That is your core message. In order to communicate that core message, you weave a narrative or a story around it. By centering your presentation around the core message, you will be able to structure all that information in a very effective manner. Then you proceed to the outline of your presentation. What is the introduction of your presentation? What will happen after the introduction? How do you conclude? So any presentation will have these three parts to it. There will be an opening or an introduction. There will be the body of the presentation, and then there will be a conclusion. In fact, most communicative acts will have these three parts to it. When you're writing an essay, it will have these three parts. When you're writing a letter or an email, it will have these three parts. So these three parts are essential to most communicative acts, right? After you have a rough draft in place, you'll have to edit it meticulously and ruthlessly in order to have a structured, fair draft in place. Make sure that you're aware of your time limit. Today, for instance, I cannot make a presentation once it is 6 o'clock. So I have a time limit in place. You should not exceed that time limit. If there is a word limit, you should also be aware of that word limit. It's always desirable to communicate your message, to tell your story in as short a manner as possible. Okay? So minimalism is key here. You have to make sure that you are communicating, you're getting your point across in a way that everybody can understand it using minimal words, right? When you are choosing what goes into your presentation, what doesn't go into your presentation, be aware that there are several kinds of elements in a presentation. For example, some things are critical to a presentation. For example, when I am telling you, making this presentation on presentation skills, it is critical to this presentation that I tell you what are the basic elements of a presentation. That's absolutely important. I can't omit that, right? So that is critical to my presentation. Likewise, all of you, regardless of what kind of presentation you are making, there will be some critical elements to it. So you have to identify those critical elements. Make sure that you have those elements in place. Then there will be some essential elements. For example, some explanations. You have to include those because they are essential to your presentation. Maybe you can make a presentation without those explanations, but you will make a better presentation if you include those explanations. Your audience will be able to grasp you better if you include those explanations. As data scientists, you'll have to work with a lot of data. So, you have a lot of data, but you also know how to visualize that data, right? You know how to visualize that data in a manner that it becomes easy to understand, right? That is an essential element of your presentation. You can make a presentation without that also, but your presentation will be much, much better if you include that essential element in it. Then there are some desirable elements in a presentation. That is, it makes your presentation just more attractive, just that much more easy to understand. The examples that I use here, for instance, those are desirable elements. I can make a presentation without giving you any examples, but if I give you a few examples, you will get my point better, or so I believe. So I give you a few examples here and there. Those are desirable elements. Similarly, your presentations will also have some desirable elements in it. It is when you put together these three elements that you get a well-rounded presentation. Is that clear to everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There are some strategies that we can use in order to draft our presentation. These are called outlining strategies. Okay. So, depending upon the kind of topic that we're working with, we can choose any of these methods. The first method is called the PREP method. PREP is an acronym. It stands for position, reason, example, position. Position, reason, example, position. Where do you use this method? This method is ideal when you have a debatable topic. What is a debatable topic? A debatable topic is that kind of a topic to which you can take different sides. There is no one right answer, no one wrong answer. Different people will have different opinions or different positions regarding that topic. So you can take any position in relation to that topic. You state that position first. After stating your position, you give reasons. Why do you take this position? Then you give examples. Because giving an example will be backing up your reasons. I have this position or opinion. This is the reason for my opinion. Look at this example. This proves my reason. And then you restate your position. Therefore, I say that this is the stand that we should take in relation to this topic. So you end just the way you began. Is that clear to everybody? For example, should capital punishment be abolished? That is a debatable topic. Different people will have different opinions regarding it, and each person will have his or her own reasons for taking that position. So you state your position, give reasons, give examples, and then restate your position. The topic given here is another example. Is gene editing for human enhancement ethical? So different people will have different opinions about it. They can state their opinion, give reasons for taking that stand or opinion, give examples that substantiate their claims, and then restate their position in order to conclude. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You are students who are studying to be data scientists, right? So you'll have to work with a great deal of data. Sometimes you'll have to make predictions on the basis of the data that is available to you. So if you are trying to make predictions on the basis of a great deal of chronologically arranged information, then you can use the past, present, future method. So basically, you're just using the chronological order, right? You're saying how were things in the past. You're saying this is how things are now in the present. And then you are predicting, since this is how things are now here in the present, I can predict reasonably that this is how things are going to be in the future on the basis of the facts or the data that I have examined. So use this past, present, future method when you want to make predictions on the basis of a great deal of information which can be chronologically arranged or ordered. You can very easily tell a story using the past, present, future method. For example, we can now edit human genes, and this may irrevocably change the future of our species. So, do we want this change or do we not want this change? How were things in the past? What kind of possibilities do we have in the present for human genome editing? And how will this impact the future? This is what you're trying to predict here. In order to answer this question, in order to make a presentation on such a topic, you can use the past, present, future method. Quick question. What does PREP stand for?
This,
Position, example, position.
Position, reason, example, position. Thank you. In order to make predictions, if you are trying to make predictions through your presentation, which method would you use?
Past, present,
Ma'am, it's
future.
past, present, future.
Past, present, future method. If you have a debatable topic, which method would you use?
Prep method.
Prep
The
method.
PREP method. Yes, very good. Right. Another method that you can use is the problem, cause, solution method. Think about businesses here, okay? So, some business is facing some kind of an issue, and that issue needs to have a solution. It needs to have some kind of a strategy to correct that issue. If this is the kind of problem that you are facing, if this is the kind of presentation that you want to make, then you use the problem, cause, solution method. You identify the problem, you look at what is causing this problem, and then you suggest a solution for this problem. Recognize the problem, figure out the causes, and then develop a solution for it. This kind of a method would be ideal for business presentations or policy presentations. When you're trying to make policy decisions, once again you'll be looking at what is the problem here, what is causing the problem, and you want a solution for that problem. Right? So, this kind of a method would be best suited for business presentations or policy presentations. For example, gene editing is a technology with great health benefits. Let's say that this is what we are going with. But a lot of people can misuse the technology. How do we ensure that it is not misused? So, what is the problem here? The problem is that there will be people who will misuse the technology for human genome editing in order to satisfy their own selfish interests. I would suggest that you keep your mics muted unless you have something to say. Mohit Madhukar Chopkar, please keep your mic muted. Oh, you have a question. Okay, okay. Please go on. If you have a question, please ask.
Ma'am, by mistake, my mic is on.
Oh, okay, okay. No worries then. Right. So, what is causing this problem? Why are people misusing? Why do you think people will misuse human genome editing technology? What is the solution for this? Right. Another method that we can use is the AIDA method. AIDA. Once again, it's an acronym. Attention, interest, desire, action. So, this is the kind of method that advertisers use. The purpose of using this method is to persuade somebody to do something. You're trying to persuade somebody to believe in something, maybe, buy something, maybe, sign up for something, maybe. You're trying to convince somebody. In order to make a persuasive presentation, you will have to use the AIDA method. First, you'll have to capture the attention of your audience. Then you'll have to build their interest in this particular product that you're trying to sell, let's say. Then you'll have to allow them to feel some kind of a desire for the product. Then you'll have to call them, make a call for action so that they would respond to it by acting on your call. That is, if it is a product that you're trying to sell, they will buy the product. If you're trying to make somebody sign up to some platform, they will sign up to that platform. If you're trying to get somebody, one of your friends, to visit a hill station with you, let's say, but they're not very willing at the beginning. So you make a presentation, very persuasive conversation, right? You build their attention, you capture their interest, you make them desire for all the wonderful things that you will have in the hill station, and then they say, okay, fine, I'll come with you. They'll take some action on the basis of your presentation. So you end the presentation with a call for action, right? This is the idea or the intention behind this, using this method, is to persuade somebody to do something. Kritik, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. What if the target audience isn't persuaded enough or they have some other work during that time? So, how do we persuade them? Like, for example, you have stated the example of hill station, like pursuing them to go, but my presentation is not that, willingly they won't go because they have some other priorities during that period. So, how do I do? What can I
So
do?
there are two things here, okay? So a presentation is not a magic trick. That is something that we need to understand. A presentation has to be delivered to the correct target audience. So if you are talking to somebody who's preoccupied, then maybe you're not delivering the presentation to the right target audience. That could also be there. You can persuade somebody who is at least, let's say, 10% willing to be persuaded, right? So you have to think about it in that sense as well. If you know that the target audience is preoccupied, then you might need to reconsider your target audience as well. But yes, of course, you can work on the quality of your presentation. How well can you capture their interest? How good are you in evoking that desire in them for this particular product? Right? How effective is your call for action? So you can re-evaluate your presentation, but I think in this specific case, you will also have to re-evaluate your target audience. Clear?
Okay, ma'am, it's clear.
Right. The second most important element of any presentation is the visual element, the slides. So you have to make sure that your slides are good at communicating the things that you want to communicate to your audience. If your slides are good at communicating what you want to communicate, then those slides are impactful slides. You might be a great designer, but the idea here is not to be a great designer. The idea here is to craft slides in such a manner that you get your message across. That should be your primary intention. There are different kinds of slides which form a deck. You will have to do this. As data scientists, I am 100% sure that at some point or the other, you will have to do this, right? So a cover slide is necessary. You will need a title there. You can add an image there, a relevant image. Let me emphasize that. An image that is relevant to your topic. You can identify yourself in that cover slide, yourself as the person who is presenting. You can have an overview slide. What are the things that I am going to discuss in this presentation? What are my objectives in making this presentation? Then there are text slides. Text slides do not have a fixed number. You will have to include as many text slides as demanded by the presentation. In all text slides, you should use a legible font. What is a legible font? A legible font is a readable font. And you should not overcrowd the slide with text. So your slide should not look cluttered. There should be minimal text in a slide. Then there are visual slides. It could be relevant pictures. It could also be in the context of a data scientist, the manner in which you visualize your data. Those visual slides can be added as necessary. Charts and graphs are also, in that sense, a visual slide. Then there are section header slides. For example, the slide just before this, the one that just said slides. That was a section header slide in my presentation. I have completed one part of my presentation. Now I'm going to the next part of my presentation. That's what it means. Then you need a summary slide which quickly recounts all the things that you discussed, reasserts your call for action. Just a second. Okay. I don't know what this link is for, but please do not send irrelevant messages in the chat box. Mohit, you have a question? Or is your hand accidentally raised? Okay, I assume it's accidentally there. Okay. Remember how it's okay, no worries. Remember how in the IDA method, we said that we would end with a call for action. If you're ending with a call for action, you will have to state that call for action in your summary slide. Then you have the final slide, which is the thank you slide. Okay? So these slides, these types of slides together will form your slide deck. Nobody can tell you exactly how many slides need to be in each of these sections. You will have to make that decision for yourself. Always keep in your mind that You are trying to communicate a message. So you do all of these selections, you make all of these decisions on the basis of how well you'll be able to communicate your message if you have these many slides in your deck. You can choose slide templates from anywhere and everywhere nowadays, right? There are so many platforms where you can design your slides. Prezi.com, SlidesGo, Google Slides, Slides Carnival, or just plain old Microsoft PowerPoint. Any of these would work. The idea here is to be aware of your content and to use a template that fits your content and your target audience. You have to be careful about what kind of images you use in your slides and about how you format your slides. Do not use images that are copyrighted, right? You can use images from Creative Commons. If you are using copyrighted images, make sure that you are citing the image. If you're using data from some place, make sure that you're citing that data. If you're using quotes, cite those quotes. Okay? Citation has to be done carefully. There are specific internationally accepted styles of citation. For example, I do not come from a data science background. I studied English. So the kind of citation that is accepted in my domain is called MLA, Modern Language Association. Likewise, each domain will have its own accepted citation style. So you should be aware of the citation style and you should know it enough to use the citation in your presentations as and when required. If you do not cite something that is copyrighted, something that is not your own, then it means you've plagiarized that information. This is equivalent to stealing. Also, it diminishes your credibility in front of your audience. It means you've not done enough work. You're not trying to verify the credibility of your sources. That is bad practice. So you should not use that. You can use graphics, but in a non-intrusive way. Don't just use so much of it that your message gets lost in it. When you're making a professional presentation, make sure that you use the same font combination and color combination across your slides. There should be consistency in terms of formatting. There are serif fonts and there are sans serif fonts. You can use them together. You can use a combination of the two. That is fine. But if you've used a sans serif font, let's say, for a title and a serif font for your content, then make sure that you use it the same way for all of your slides. It is preferable to not use fonts that are too informal, like Comic Sans. Likewise, when you're choosing a color palette, just like you decided on a font combination, decide also on a color combination. You choose a professional looking color palette and you use that same color palette across your slides. Before you go in to make your presentation, verify that your formatting is consistent. If there is anything that is not quite clean, a little cluttered maybe, a little uneven maybe, then make sure that you correct those things before you head into your presentation. Right, any questions or clarifications? Give me a second, I'll have a drink of water. If you have any questions, please ask. Okay, questions? Hetal.
Hello. Yeah, hello, ma'am. So in second bullet point, there is smart art. What do you mean by smart art?
So, if you're trying to make, I don't know if you've come across this, but there are certain fixed templates for smart art. I It's funny that you should ask this question because I would have thought that you guys were more tech savvy than I am. But yes, I have used smart art. You have these set templates. You don't really have to format your text. You can use a smart art template, and the text that you've selected will automatically turn into that. Okay, clear? Right.
Yes.
Is that okay? Any other questions? Right. What you see on the left side is serif font, and what you see on the right side is a sans serif font. And serif is just this little decorative stroke that you see at the end of the letter form. This decorative stroke is a serif font, is indicative of a serif font. This decorative tail is indicative of a serif font. This decorative stroke is indicative of a serif font. Look at this. You do not have that decorative stroke in a sans serif font, right? This is how a letter form looks on a page. In a presentation, you can use a judicious combination, that is a sensible combination of serif fonts and sans serif fonts. Let's look at the relevance of the two kinds of fonts. Serif fonts are intended primarily for long sequences of words. Because there is this little feet or this little stroke, which is called the serif, it has an effect of guiding one letter into another. So you get a sequence, right? Reading becomes a little more easier when you have that little guiding stroke. It helps your eyes stay within the line of the text. If you have like huge paragraphs of text, then serif fonts are preferable in that context, which is why a lot of the time you will see that if you're making an academic writing, a piece of academic writing, they will insist on Times New Roman, because academic writing is often paragraph after paragraph of text, and you want a serif font, a formal looking serif font for that purpose. Therefore, the insistence on Times New Roman. You can use sans serif fonts for a variety of purposes, but think of it the other way around, I mean. If you're using a serif font for text, then you could use the sans serif font for the titles or the subtitles. In children's books, typically, sans serif fonts are more prominently used. Okay? That is because these fonts are considered more simple than the serif fonts. But in a presentation, since there will not be any huge chunks of continuous text, you are free to use a combination of both serif and sans serif fonts as you see fit. It doesn't matter in what way you use it, so long as you use it consistently. Use the same font for the title, use the same font for the content across slides. If you look at the right side of this slide, you will see some examples of serif fonts and sans serif fonts and what they indicate. Times New Roman, for instance. Professional, traditional, very reliable. Century Gothic, for instance. Happy font, elegant font. You find it a lot of the time in children's books. It has that very rounded feel to it, very simple and attractive. Had somebody raised their hand? Other than Mohit, I mean. Did
Yes,
somebody have a
ma'am, I have a
question?
doubt.
Yes, Madhav, please go ahead.
Ma'am, does the font creates any bad or
No,
good
no, I
image to
can't
our
hear
PPT?
properly.
Ma'am, does font creates a good or bad image to our presentation?
Could you
Ma'am,
repeat the
does
question?
font
Can you please be a little
creates any
louder?
bad or good image for our presentation?
I I don't know what is going on,
Uh,
but is everybody else able to hear
yeah,
Madhav
ma'am,
clearly?
he is saying that is font create any bad or good image in presentation?
Oh, okay. Does your choice of font create any kind of bad image or good image? Yeah, so it's not about the bad image or good image. It's about the kind of presentation that you are making. For example, you would not really want to use a font like Comic Sans, let's say, which is too informal in a professional presentation. In a professional presentation, but you can use any combination of all of these fonts, but you have to be consistent about it. If I'm using Georgia for this title, I should also use Georgia for this title. If I'm using Arial for this content, I should also use Arial for this content. And this should remain the same across all the slides that I use. It's just that different font faces are set to indicate different attributes. But you don't have to be too worried about that. So long as you are consistent in your choice of font and you do not use a lot of informal looking or funny looking fonts, so long as your fonts are legible or readable, that should be fine. You can use any combination of fonts. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Hetal, for helping me out there. I could not understand what he was asking me. Thank you for that. Right. This might be of interest to you guys. You have a table here. A lot of data in that table, right? So on the left side, you see a table. On the right side, you see a table with minor formatting to it. The only difference between the tables is that the one on the right has been formatted in order to make the reading easier. So the content has not changed, only the appearance has changed. The title has changed. The title has become more specific. It's not just stock and sales report, it's stock and sales report for a particular day. You've specified that, you've pinpointed that. The idea of formatting data heavy, content heavy tables like this is that it becomes easier to access that data. If somebody wants to make a quick sweep of the data, somebody wants to make note of something rather very quickly, they'll find that it is easier to do it using the second table. So in a presentation where you do not have a lot of time, the one on the right is more preferable than the one on the left. Death by PowerPoint. When does a PowerPoint backfire? When is a PowerPoint presentation not your best friend? How can you fail in a presentation? Because you're relying too much on your slides. That's what we're talking about here. Now, the first point here is to make a conscious effort to not rely too much on your slides. Slides can help you, but slides are not capable of making a presentation on their own. You will have to allow your audience to understand the slides, the content on the slides, using your own presentation, using your own delivery. So, to some extent, you should go beyond what is there on the slide. If you are too dependent on the slide, you will not be able to make an effective narrative, tell a good story, make a coherent presentation out of the slides, because your slides will act as a limiting factor rather than an enabling factor. Sometimes we become too dependent on our slides when we are underprepared. So the only way to correct that is by being sufficiently prepared. The second step, the second point to bear in mind is that we should not make cluttered slides. Do not dump too much of data on the slide. It could also be just a text slide. But let's say you've given whole paragraphs of text on the slide instead of arranging it into coherent small bulleted points. That's a bad thing to do in a presentation. You might have a lot of information to communicate, but make sure that you only put that information. It could just be text. It could be a combination of text and numbers in accessible forms. So this accessible form could be in the form of a bulleted point, could be in the form of a well-formatted table, could be in the form of a well-formatted graph. Do not dump too much of information into your slides. Customize your slides. You can also customize your presentation, your speech, on the basis of whom you are talking to. For example, I am now talking to students. I am not talking to business executives. I can't assume that you know everything. Right? Can I assume? For example, I assumed that you would know what smart art was. Maybe I shouldn't have assumed that. Right? Because you are students and I should be able to tell you what each point on my slide means. However, if you're talking to business executives, if you get into very rudimentary explanations, if you go back to the basics and spend a lot of time talking about those basics, then they might not take that very well. You'll have to get to your point, and you'll have to get to your point quickly. That's very important. So customize your slides as well as your speech on the basis of whom you are talking to, on the basis of your audience. This is why it's very important to know your audience. If you're talking to investors, for instance, instead of saying the whole story, you quickly cut to the chase. You tell them why you should invest in my project. In 2 or 3 years, this is going to be so profitable for you. The scope of this industry is just massive. I am going to be capable of expanding my clientele, let's say, at such a phenomenal pace if you could invest a little bit into my project at this stage. So you're making this very lucrative for them. You're trying to attract them to the possibility of this investment, right? So you will have to customize, personalize your information as well as your speech on the basis of whom you're talking to. If you fail to do that, then at the end of the day, your audience is not going to be able to make sense of the content in your slides. And that's a bad thing. Whatever you've tried to communicate to them visually, you will simply have failed in doing that. So the first step is to make a conscious effort to not rely too much on your slides. The second step is to refrain from dumping data on your slides. The third step is to customize your slides as well as your speech on the basis of your audience's profile. The last part of a presentation is the delivery. I'm going to stop here for today because we will have to continue with this presentation tomorrow. I'm going to take some time and ask you if you have any kind of clarifications to make, questions to raise, any comments to make maybe.
Ma'am, is this session recorded?
This session is recorded. The session is recorded. It will be uploaded to YouTube and you will get the playlist link as well.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excuse me,
Saravanan, you had a
ma'am.
question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, my doubt
Ah.
was you said that we should only use two fonts for the entire presentation.
No. I didn't say you should only use two fonts. I said you should use the same combination of fonts, right? So look at this
May I
slide,
know
for
why so,
instance.
ma'am? No, I'm asking like why so. Like, let's say if I use sans serif for one, in one slide I use sans serif and the other one, ma'am, and the other slide why can't I use like other types and I just mix and match the fonts?
Okay, in the context of a professional presentation, if you do that, that might look extremely unprofessional and shoddy. There'll be no consistency across your slides. It's the same thing for colors. Look at this slide, for instance. It's actually a lot easier to explain using colors. Look at this slide, for instance. This is one color. This is another color. Okay? And this is a textured kind of color. This is another color. And then I have my content in black. So this is a color palette. I only have to use the same color palette across my slides. If I use the same color palette across my slides, it will look more professional. And like Kunal Kumar has pointed out, if you start mixing and matching in no particular order, it will become that much more difficult for your audience to absorb that information. This presentation is relatively easy for me. Why? Because I have something like an hour. And an hour is a long time for a presentation. But typical professional presentations will be for 10 to 15 minutes, which is a very short duration of time. So in that duration of time, the idea is to use your visuals in such a manner that the content is best accessible to your audience. You can mix and match to a certain extent. Using that decided color palette, feel free to creatively mix and match. But if you go beyond that, if you are mixing and matching without a set palette in place, set font palette, let me say, that's not a usage, you say color palette, but I'm just drawing an analogy. Set combination of fonts, then that becomes disorderly, chaotic. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Anybody else?
Hello, ma'am. What should be ratio of visual data and text data in our presentation?
So there's no, people say that there's something called 30-70, but that's not a hard and fast rule. The idea here is quite simply to have adequate white space. Okay? And white space, let me just show you just a second. Right. This is my title. The title, after the title, there's adequate white space on the page, which ensures that the title can stand out on its own, and it's very clear to anybody who's looking at the slide that this is my title. It's easily accessible in that sense. These are numbered points, equivalent to bulleted points, which I have once again ordered in boxes with adequate white space between them, which makes the reading easier. So the idea here is quite simply to have adequate white space on the page, to not have a cluttered page, and to arrange your data in such a manner that your audience can access it very quickly. Is that a satisfactory answer? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am. I also have another question. Like it's not related to presentation, but during my past life, when I was giving presentation, when I go to stage, like I just feel blank out. I feel like I lost information in my mind, what I prepared, and like, do you know how to overcome our fear when we are giving a presentation in front of many people?
It happens, right? So the first thing is to just understand that this is a very normal thing. It happens. Even if you prepare a lot, it can happen. And the only way to overcome is through practice. The more you practice, the better you'll get. So consistent practice can help you the best here. But even with consistent practice, people can feel blank. People can stutter a lot when they start to present. They can forget things. All of these things are very common. So there are a couple of things that you can do. One is to breathe. Making sure that you are breathing well while you're presenting and before you present. Maybe taking a few breathing exercises immediately before you present can really help you calm down. That can be helpful. Another thing, which is just a practical tip, really, it doesn't do anything about your nervousness, but it's just a practical tip. If you can control the pace of your speech, you will have greater control over the content that you're trying to deliver. Sometimes you can collect your thoughts better when you are speaking a little slowly. And actually, if you speak very fast, people don't understand you. People don't follow you that well. So, in a professional context, it can really help if you're speaking in a moderate pace, not too fast a pace. It helps your audience and it helps you as well. Those are the two things that I can suggest, but ultimately, practice does it. Okay. Thank you everybody for joining me today. I hope today's session was informative for you and I hope that this was helpful to you as well. I really hope all of you will be here tomorrow as well. Tomorrow we'll conclude our session on presentation skills. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening ahead. You may now leave the meeting.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you everybody.